Sounds good. I just turned it on.
Oh, begin? Okay.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. Today we will talk about the reverse logistics strategy. As more consumer product companies recognize the profitability of online sales and prepare every effort to promote their e-commerce business, a company's reverse logistics strategy plays an increasingly significant role in saving costs and boosting revenue. Our project will focus on the e-commerce reverse logistics. So I will talk about why the reverse logistics is so important to the e-commerce company. In 2015, merchandise returns claimed roughly 8% of the total retail sales. It's about 260 billion. As the rapid growth of e-commerce, which accounting for roughly 8% of all retail sales in the first quarter of 2016, and expected to exceed 10% by 2018. Returns are estimated to spike. Online shoppers are more likely to return the merchandise since they usually don't try the products in the store. Consequently, e-commerce retailers are supposed to invest more in reverse logistics. So it tends to play an important role in enhancing the bottom line. Here are what reverse logistics will help. First, it helps to differentiate a company. Return service uniquely identifies a company and differentiates it from other competitors. According to a study conducted by Dr. Peterson and Kuma, there is a positive correlation between less restrictive return policies and the customer purchasing amount, because their concerns and risks have been largely mitigated. It also tremendously improves the merchandise value that the customers perceive. Customers will give preference to those companies from which they have a satisfying return experience. Second, it helps to recapture the revenue. Return merchandise will usually cause reduction in the prior sales or even end up being a total loss. However, revenue can be fully or partly recaptured through the excellence of reverse logistics. It could be resold at a full price. Return merchandise can be restocked for resale in the primary market, but it requires an effective reverse logistic process to handle it, which involves inspecting, sorting, relabeling, and repackaging within a specific time frame when this merchandise is still in fashion. Thus, the merchandise can be sold at its full price again and recognize the profit. Resale at the discounted prices. Some return merchandise could be repaired, refurnished, or remanufactured and resold at the discounted prices, which the value will be redeemed and offset part of the handling costs. An efficient logistics process will facilitate the whole process and reduce the costs in inventory, processing, and outstanding payable. Third, maintain the cost effective. Reverse logistics cost will increase in light of the surge of e-commerce. Inventory management, labor, and transportation, which are important elements of the reverse logistics, could intensively impact the overall cost of the company. All those costs can be effectively controlled through the properly designing the reverse logistics process and managing the reverse networks. Failure to maintain a cost-effective reverse logistic process will lead to profit deterioration. Fourth, sustainability matters. Many companies highlight their sustainability efforts, but usually ignore the reverse logistics could be leveraged to their sustainability initiative. The life of return merchandise could be extended by repairing, refurnishing, or remanufacturing through the reverse logistic pipeline. Waste could be disposed or destroyed in an eco-friendly way with the help of reverse logistics. Okay, then I will pass to Sashi to talk about the challenge of reverse logistics. And I'll go to the class. Thank you so much, you guys.
Thank you,
Thank
Kshan.
Bye.
Bye. So I am going to talk about the challenges that will have while doing reverse logistics. So the main thing about reverse logistics is the main challenge that can arise during reverse logistics is that the pricing of any commodity keeps fluctuating. So the returns of these commodities, while returning these commodities, this issue needs to be taken seriously. The challenge for retailers and vendors is to process returns at a proficiency level and that allows quick and efficient and cost effective merchandise collection and return. It's very important because this is taken very seriously in a market. For example, a Fortune 500 company saw the value of their stock drop by 13% due to government action taken in reaction to their poor reverse logistic process. Um, the other thing that is that's challenging in reverse logistic is that it's a highly labor intensive. Sorry. So, for example, if we bring 48 comforters and we need to sell all of them together, we can deal with all 48 at once, and the cost is spread over all the comforters. But if a consumer brings the comforter back, the same activity, that is the receiving, inspection, and the stock, has to be done now for just that one unit. So if you multiply that times a couple of hundred or a couple of thousand returns each day, you can see how much labor intensive this process is going to get. The next thing that is challenging is assert the value of the product. So it's rather difficult to ascertain the cost of a product that is worth 1,000 when it has a minor defect, because with defect neither is the product worth the original cost or it cannot be cost in any other way. Therefore, proper mechanism to ascertain the value of the product needs to be adopted. The third issue is the keeping track of the warranty status. Uh, this perhaps might be the most complex thing to handle. There are many situations when we have to track the secondary warranties, and it gets really difficult to organize these things because most of the reverse logistics softwares are unable to track the secondary warranties back to the OEMs, which makes the process of placing claims a tad difficult. Therefore, the organization ends up losing warranty reimbursement amount from the suppliers. The next challenge is when the involvement of the contractors, subcontractors, or distributors. When we have to do the reverse logistics, we have to take into consideration the involvement of contractors and distributors. The software fails to capture the movement of replacements parts back to the dealers or contractors. This creates a lot of confusion in the accounts as well as keeping check on the quality of products being distributed. Also, there is an issue of federal legislation. For the past number of years, the state and federal legislation impacts the returns of processing. Many states have banned disposal of laptops, desktops, computers in their landfills. Many of these states have forced manufacturers if their products have been identified in their landfills, and they have to pay heavy fines to clean up those products thrown by their customers, even if it was not even if it was without the manufacturer's knowledge. And hence, such legislation can increase government control, reporting requirements, and can increase the potential financial risk. Now I will give it to Taylor to continue. Thank you.
Thank you, Sakshi. And then just for whoever is going to be watching this, we may have a brief pause in between my section and Harrison's. We're just waiting for him to hop on the call. He just got done with another meeting last minute. So if that's the case, when we post this online, we'll go ahead and let you know what time to move over to sort of pick up where we left off. So although this is a little bit out of order, I think that everybody has enough context as to what the challenges are of reverse logistics strategy and sort of why it matters and what the background is, enough to where we can kind of start going over some general recommendations that we have. This list that I sort of compiled is non-exhaustive, meaning that there's definitely many other recommendations that we could have formulated based on the challenges we identified, but these were some of the most obvious ones that could be applied through any business, regardless of the industry that they're in. So the following recommendations that we do have are based off of what we feel to be feasible goals and processes that can, of course, be readily implemented by any client, including our theoretical one. So in general, effectively organizing and executing a reverse logistics supply chain strategy in the e-commerce sector should be done with careful consideration, mostly because the e-commerce sector is a very rapidly changing environment. I can't really think of an industry that changes as frequently and as quickly as e-commerce and anything related to the World Wide Web. So some areas that we wanted to recommend to our theoretical client to improve its reverse logistics strategy include the following. So the first and foremost, focus on making adjustments to policies and logistics based on your specific business strategy goals and industry. So although that sounds obvious, I think that it was a really good recommendation to keep in mind, in the sense that every industry, product, service is unique in its own way and creates a very specific type of value for its customers. So therefore, it requires a certain amount of sound judgment regarding what types of policies, logistics practices are going to be appropriate for a specific business. So it is really necessary to develop and improve on a good returns management policy and program that highlights your strengths and minimizes your weaknesses. One really good example would be return policies for the food industry versus the retailing industry. And I sort of just I just thought of this on my own, but you know, for Nordstrom, for a retailer, for example, it's more appropriate to have a return anytime policy in place where customers can kind of come in regardless of the date of purchase and get a return or exchange for no cost to them. However, this would be largely inappropriate and ineffective for a grocery wholesale giant such as Costco, where obviously food products are often perishable within a matter of days. So that's just sort of an example of where you need to be aware of the industry you're in and the products that you sell, and why that's sort of applicable to your reverse logistics strategy. And then another area that we wanted to touch on was improving practices relating to return policies. So as we mentioned earlier, the e-commerce landscape changes quite frequently. So a business is going to need to be flexible and agile in the way that they handle their return policies. Although it is beneficial to have some type of policy set in place for the return process, equally so, we felt that it's important that e-commerce firms be able to think ahead and be prepared to alter their policies to fit the needs of their customers along with their supply chain. So that's where this idea of recommending improved flexibility of practices comes in. You want to make sure that your return policies and reverse logistics are in a position to easily be altered when necessary, but at the same time be stable for any particular time in the landscape where it needs to be stable. And then the third recommendation that we have is put in place sustainability efforts to support our reverse logistics strategy. So the company's reverse logistics strategy does need to be sustainable. These efforts need to be in support of the overall business and the stakeholders of the future as well as the present. So a really important factor in the improvement of reverse logistics is sustainability efforts. And some in particular get highlighted a lot in the media. They get highlighted a lot in our classes, but that could include seriously including waste management practices and procedures, tracking inventory using automated software systems, minimizing the amount of held inventory at any given time. And then really in general, with regards to sustainability, we think it's really important that you're setting concrete goals for improvements. So for example, an example of a good and easy to understand goal would be, our company wants to recycle all of our returned products 90% of the time by year 2020 or whatever year your goal is. So just making sure that you have sustainability goals that really force you to implement sustainability into your reverse logistics practice is really important. And I think too, given, you know, the issues with potential financial risk in reverse logistics, government fines, warranties, things like that, it's really important to practice sustainable business in order to protect from those challenges and potential issues. And then another recommendation that we had was really consider minimizing returns through the development of a strong, sound repair refurbishing program. So basically, you know, although you should have a reasonable customer-friendly return policy, and that's something that everybody should have in place to some extent, it is important in smart reverse logistics planning to have a way to minimize the amount of inventory that gets marked as returned. So one consideration to make is sort of by asking the question, well, how can we reuse, refurbish, restore, or resell these products in a way that won't result in profit losses? Or at the very least, minimize those losses in such a way that it's more beneficial than accepting a product as returned. And sort of working off of that, the last thing that we have on our list of recommendations is really understanding the feasibility of reselling your products versus accepting returns in your particular industry. So really this area sort of focuses on, okay, how do we improve our reverse logistics by testing and analyzing the feasibility of emphasizing a return process over a reselling process or vice versa. And so this comes with having a really good program for detailed analytics and testing processes that will identify which route is the most profitable at any given time. You know, it could be that a company thrives off of restoring and reselling its products versus strictly accepting returns, but it might be the opposite for another country or company. So really finding balance between those based on specific products and services with regards to the reverse logistics strategy is really important as well. And I think that's all I have for my section. I guess we can just wait for Harrison. Or I mean, I still have to record it, but if you guys want to get off the call, you can. That's fine.
You sure?
It's up to you. I feel like he shouldn't be that much longer. We're just going to have to tell people to cut past this section when they watch it. But
we can just see the time, and then according to that, we can tell them which part they should skip.
Yeah. Because he said...
Oh, yeah, he joined.
Oh, here we go.
Okay, great.
That was literally perfect timing.
Oh, was it?
Yeah, so we're just going to cut out this section, but I wanted to still record so that you could just jump right in.
Okay, perfect. So then everybody's already gone?
Yeah.
Okay. Sorry about that, first of all, y'all. Sorry.
It's
that
fine.
meeting ran over 30 minutes. Like everything does. Let me one moment to catch my breath. Okay, so my part is just on general practices in reverse logistics for e-com businesses. So two things that I wanted to bring up first. One, this is from a Harris Interactive poll. 85% of customers will stop buying from a business if the returns process is a hassle. 85. Conversely, 95% of customers are likely to return if the returns process is convenient. So basically what those numbers are showing immediately right off the bat is that the returns process is critical to not only customer satisfaction, but also the health of the company financially and from a supply chain perspective. There are four main parts. Oh, I guess you can't see my hand. Here, let me scoot back a little bit. So there are four main parts to the returns logistics process. They're receiving, issuing credit, inspection and sorting, and asset recovery. So in terms of receiving, the point is to find out who returned the goods. Are the goods that returned the same goods that were purchased? We also need to find out the condition of these goods and what was actually received. So it's very labor intensive. Many companies actually use an assembly line approach. I don't know if you guys remember when we went to the Columbia DC, their returns process was very labor intensive, and it was not unlike a assembly line. So you had one person that was lifting the boxes and putting them on these little tracks. They were pushing it down. Somebody with a scanner was scanning it and then pushing it down. And so it was very methodical, and you do your one job, and that was kind of it. But it's critical. It requires a lot of skill and talent, and it also needs to be very quick and efficient. The second part is issuing credit, and this can be credit in terms of money back, store credit, what was the other word? Exchanging something. So this basically just makes sure that SKUs returned match the SKUs purchased. And a good receiving and credit process significantly reduces the workload for the customer service personnel. The third part of reverse logistics for e-com is inspection and sorting. So this is to, basically the main goal of this is to make sure that the SKUs that are returned are able to be sold either for the highest selling price or the highest recovery value. So this involves a lot of training and product knowledge for your staff members in inspection and sorting to be the most effective. They need to have a very intimate knowledge of the product catalog. Those that have more knowledge are able to process faster, and they have a greater chance of getting a higher return for the returned SKU. It's heavily dependent on the type of SKU. So for example, Columbia's clothing, like their basic like apparel, like pants and shirts and stuff, that is a significantly easier process than, say, returning like some kind of heavy industrial equipment. Once this has been done, every SKU will be given an ID for tracking and data gathering. And from here, they can be sent to restock, repackaging for sale, return to vendor, disposition, or scrap. Which brings me to the fourth and final component of reverse logistics for e-com, and this is the asset recovery. Again, the 5 types of assets for asset recovery: restock, repackaging for sale, return to vendor, disposition, and scrap. And I'm going to briefly go over each one of them. And those are in order from most desirable to least. So at the top, you obviously want to restock. Least desirable is to scrap. Restock, these are goods that are brand new, they're in great condition, and there's minimal loss to value if they're returned. So basically, when a SKU that's in really good condition and is new is returned, they just turn around and restock it, and they're able to sell it for the original price. Repackaged goods, these are goods that are, they might still be new, but maybe they weren't returned in a good condition, or maybe these are older products but are still in good condition. These are going to be sold for a marked down price than the original price, but they're still going to make a profit. Return to vendor is an interesting option because a lot of the times you are able to recoup your cost loss if you just send it back to your vendor because of some issue. However, you need to consider logistics costs and handling costs in sending it back to a vendor, because a lot of the times doing that can be it can be more costly than just taking it and absorbing that lost cost. Disposition, so these are SKUs that you don't want to sell, but they still have value. So a lot of the time, these are SKUs that are handed to a third party, and the third party sells them. So this can be stuff that, for instance, a company might sell these return SKUs through eBay or through a third-party vendor site, but they still have some kind of value, but the company itself just doesn't want to sell it. This can also include out-of-date SKUs, so SKUs that have been removed from inventory or catalogs. Final is scrap, and this is basically what it sounds like when SKUs are scrapped. One important point to note, though, in regards to scrap, is that in nowadays, especially for e-commerce, very few items are actually scrapped because chances are there is somebody in the world who wants to purchase this return SKU or this damaged SKU or out-of-date SKU. So you can find a seller. It can just be very difficult. I know that was a lot. Sorry. So that was.
You should have heard mine.
Oh, was it similar?
Yeah, I feel like we were sitting here forever, and they were just like nodding at me while I was talking.
Okay. So those are the four main parts of reverse logistics and e-com.
Great. Well, thank you guys. And then I'll save this, and I'm just going to email everybody a copy, and then whoever wants to post it on Sunday can post it then.
Okay. Perfect. Thank you so much.
Okay,
Also,
I'll talk to you guys
before you
later.
go, Taylor, before you go.
What?
Before you go, don't put this in the video, please.
Okay, hold on.
Just put it